The Walzers. There she goes, regular as clockwork. The cafe proprietor nudged a sluggish-looking student serving ice cream. Weird, don't you think? He said in a half-whisper. After everything that happened, you'd think this would be the last place she'd come. The young man had heard the story before. It was ancient history, but seeing her here, he followed her with his eyes while a scoop of melting ice cream dripped down his white t-shirt. Catherine passed the amusement arcade. She felt that satisfying spring of the boards under her feet, as familiar to her as lines on her face. The carousel horses snorted at her with their large flaring nostrils. Then came the bumper cars, noisy, impudent things. Her ankles were chafed and swollen above ill-fitting shoes. She lowered herself carefully on her usual seat and inhaled the air. A blend of salt, sugar, and grease. The film across her eyes had worsened lately, and for a brief moment she couldn't see it. She blinked. Then she felt a tingle of excitement. There it was. The separate leaves which formed the undulating carriage, the cup-shaped cars sliding on their well-oiled coasters. There was no ride quite like the Walzers. Sundays had always meant a family trip to Walton Pier. Pennies for the slot machines, weighty, substantial coins not like today's fiddly things, and candy floss, not in a bag, but on a stick. But most important were the rides. There was an art in choosing the fastest waltzer car. You had to know what you were doing. It took experience. Quick, the red one, shouted Mary, Catherine's sister, as she raced the other riders for the best of the pick. The steep slant of the car on the revolving platform had to be exactly right. Hopping in, they sat side by side like two pieces of cheese in a mousetrap, their slim teenage figures held in place by the heavy safety bar. Exchanging sidelong grins, the sisters acknowledged their shared anticipation, their shared mastery of the ride. This way, cried Mary as the car began to turn. Her words were unnecessary. Leaning to one side, their combined body weight propelled the motion on, spinning and spinning with the dark hair flying in their heads pinned against the shiny black plastic. After a few minutes, they saw a pair of hands grip the back of the car. Ready, girls? Bobby grinned roguishly at them. Catherine's cheeks burned, and suddenly the world turned twice the speed. Fancy a ride, Cathy? A cheerful voice broke into her memories. Why, Bobby, she said, sweeping away a stray wisp of grey hair. What are you doing here? Waiting for you, my darling, he said, flirtatious as ever. She smiled shyly. He hadn't changed a bit. Standing with his hands on his hips, those dancing blue eyes stared back at her. She could have been 16 again. Not today, Bobby, she said, remembering her tea. It was haddock on Fridays, very tasty with scrambled eggs. She pictured the bright yellow fish next to the pale yellow eggs. Catherine walked slowly up the uneven pathway, leaning heavily on her stick. Today the slight hill seemed steeper than ever. She paused to rest on the corner where the crazy golf used to be. She'd been in love with him, of course, with his tousled blonde hair and lazy smile. He rode the Walzers like a yacht skimming the waves, courageous and beautiful. Catherine loves Barbie, Catherine loves Barbie, her school friends chanted relentlessly. She blushed and denied it, but it was true. Bobby Smith's a wrong 'un, his father told her. No good setting your cap at him, my girl. She was forbidden to see him, so they'd met in secret, in the concrete shelters along the seafront, among the marshy grasslands and tidal creeks to the backwaters, or in the flaxen sun-drenched cornfields behind her home. They spent one glorious summer together. "Will you always love me, Bobby?" she asked one June afternoon as they lay together amid the straw bales. Shifting languidly, Bobby raised himself on one elbow to look at her. The midday sun streamed around his head, creating a halo of light. There was a dust on his tanned face, and stalks of pale yellow straw clung to his golden hair. "My sweet Cathy," he mumbled, his eyes full of fire and life. "Promise me," she breathed into his ear. "Promise me we'll be together forever." She felt the warmth of his body cover her like a blanket, his tender lips press against hers. "I'll never let you go, my Cathy," was all he said. It came to an end at the same place it had begun, on the Walzers, in a twisted irony of fate. Laying in the hospital bed, Catherine heard her sister's voice dim with grief. "The newspapers are full of it. They say it was a weak cable." Catherine didn't need to see the words. Bobby's magnificent body cruelly trapped under the relentless grinding metal. The ride travelling on in a frenzy of speed. Her own gut-wrenching scream above the strangled whine of the motor. She remembered the orange sparks piercing the air like fireworks. Then nothing. Just darkness. He had died, and Catherine had lived. Catherine wiped a blob of egg from her chin. She'd married Gerald Piper, an insurance salesman. They hadn't been happy. Not really. Open fires weren't popular these days, she thought, drawing the rug over her knees. It was all radiators and instant hot water. She watched the orange flames licking at the glowing coals. Heavy with sleep, her eyes closed. The sing-song music of the carousel floated into the airless room. Catherine's head lolled forward. A voice whispered in her ear, "I've been waiting for you, my Cathy."